The Sleepers by David Pitcher Greaves. In fact, were it given to our human eye to see into the consciences of others, we would judge a man much more surely from what he dreams than from what he thinks. Victor Hugo, Les Miserables. But what if he does not dream? Prologue, Neverland. My father liked to say, "We are all equals. This is America." Well, either my family killed that America, or he conveniently forgot what it was like as a child sleeper. Memory loss makes for better parenting. I had just walked into the front door from school on a Friday, excited by art class and math and every new subject. Now, if only my parents had forgotten I was eligible. Everything would be perfect. Maybe they'd throw a surprise party, something for me and Ray and our families. Nothing too extravagant. It was hard to make too many friends when you were the second richest kid at school. Mom would make one of her classic Italian dinners, reserved for very special occasions. After Grandfather would tell some grumpy story, we'd devour that sweet creme brulee with its hard, sugary sheen, the type you had to stab to get to the good stuff. We lived at the old governor's mansion. My grandfather, John Sr., bought the relic when the state was so broke they had to liquidate everything but the Capitol. Even that edifice was under consideration for the right price, but our families declined. John Sr. gifted us the house when I was young, believing a kid needed a proper home, albeit a sterile, stony place. Great large rooms occupied the first floor, including my father's opulent study, designed 2 centuries prior. The lavish furnishings warned children that this room was definitely not meant for play. As far back as I could remember, I'd watched my father, John Jr., upload sleep for his client. But I couldn't imagine he'd inflict the same punishment on me. After all, I was just turning 8. I was his boy, his only child, and I had his name. I was John the Third. I entered the office from the main hall, searching for my parents. They had remembered. Father sat behind the desk, still in work attire. Dr. Jenkins, bald and foreboding, stood at his side, neatly stacking his torture devices on the spare corner of the mahogany. That was my corner, the bit of acreage John Jr. preserved for me to do homework in his presence. My mom, the only sane person in the office, rose from the visitor's couch to welcome me home. "Hi, John," she greeted loudly as she bent down to squeeze me tight. Then with her head close to my ear, her 2 young gray hair draped over my shoulders, she whispered, "I'm sorry, hon. I did try, but you'll be okay. You'll be okay." No balloons, no presents from my online wish list, just a death sentence. 2072 was not going to be my year. In fact, my years were over. "Dad! Dad! Please don't let him do this. Please don't do this. Please!" I repeated desperately, but no words came out. I just stared dumbstruck. My mom released me from her hug and sat again, awkwardly watching me await the death sentence. Her sofa was a black hole to any comfort she might send my way. "It's time, son. I'm very proud of you." That was all my nonchalant father could muster. Empty words and empty solace from both parents. Dr. Jenkins moved from his perch, measured my cranium in silence, and adjusted the children's-sized band with its sensors and visor. My mind repeated the voiceless imploration, begging, "Please, Dad. Please, please." I looked over to my mom, but she couldn't stop my father. I was smart enough to know he would not save me and would not be stopped by her. My eyes welled, but the dam did not burst. They said nothing. The room grew hot, such a stuffy room for administering death. The doctor shuffled across the polished cherry floor between me, helpless and center, and back to his pile of tear. He was our family doctor, a good man, or so I thought, until he became an accomplice in my misery. This was the job. Make house calls for the rich, even if that meant stooping to visit the occasional sleeper when required. He placed the thin metallic band around my head, making final adjustments to the size as if this were just another baseball cap or eyeglass fitting. The sensors rested against my cranium just above the ears. Slightly cold, the band sent a shiver through my body. I should have expected this sensation, having curiously tried my father's visor multiple times, but the feeling was different for my own device, evoking a sort of coming-of-age dread one never wants, and so one never ponders. My mother saw my visible shake and broke her own silence. "John, she squeaked from her relegated sideline, her tone a question to me if everything was okay. I forced the bravest smile an 8-year-old could muster as my father sternly answered the one-word question really meant for me. "Susan, he's fine. He's just nervous." I focused on the moment, unwilling to disappoint my father. This was not his loose gadgetry too big for a child. This shackle felt designed for me. I took a few deep breaths, trying to calm down. "Move your head left to right," commanded Dr. Jenkins, breaking his silence. "Now in a circle." I complied with his directions, taking in for the first time just how much I hated that perfectly ordered office and that horrible doctor. A slight pressure prevented the contraption from falling off with my motion, a key design feature for optimal sleep. He then showed me how to lower the visor over my eyes, a move I had previously found so entertaining using my father's equipment. The contraption was quite simple, but I had the sickening feeling knowing what must certainly come next. Visor with REM pickup was only part of the equation. My mind repeated quiet reassurances as Dr. Jenkins prepped me for part 2. I can do this. I was meant to do this. It won't hurt. My dad's done it. He said it will be fine. I was doped on promises of family responsibility to SleepFree Inc., our sleeper heritage, the voyage of a new experience, the future inheritance, and all the other half-truths prescribed by my family line of master liars. Dr. Jenkins turned back from the desk, holding the first of 2 needles and specialty tubes known as sleep ports. I can only imagine that any other child would have cried or screamed already, but I was prepared, and I had a destiny. Oh, how that doping had done its job. He sanitized my inner elbow and brought the first large needle to my arm. "This may sting," he said, reciting a habit that implied more certainty than "may" ever deserved. I can do this. I can do this. I was not going to cry. I was certainly not going to scream. Dr. Jenkins plunged the giant needle into my arm. I shrieked with all my 8-year-old might. Our butler delivered my assigned client his first sleep Sunday evening as a test run. Sleep chemical extracted fresh from my ports, REM pattern off the visor, and very angry brain waves. 7 wasted hours. Stolen hours. I lost my whole afternoon sleeping for Ray. Monday morning found me alone at my desk, work pad fired up, ready for the rest of the class to appear. The grogginess from sleep drugs was foreign and horrible. How'd so many people get past this feeling? You'd think more sleeper children would have run away, but this was life, and few knew different. The grand clock tower over the school entrance chimed the half-hour mark. I was early, again, like always. My father refused to hire a second driver, wanting to preserve some normalcy for the family. And since he'd never trust me riding solo in auto mode, I came early every day, leaving time for the driver to get back to my parents. A sandy-haired boy, charming with his messy hair and missing teeth, bounced in the room, dashing straight for me. I rubbed the weariness out of my eyes. I'd had plenty of sleep, no doubt there. Newly inducted, Ray could not contain the enthusiasm typical for fresh clients. "Hey, John. Got a ride early so I could tell you all about it." I nodded in dread, not used to someone living off my sleep or even knowing what that really meant. But the pained face was lost on my exuberant friend. "That was so awesome," he continued, still bouncing at my desk. "Weird, but awesome. My parents let me stay up all night, just awake, doing whatever I wanted. Can you believe it?" No birthday parties, and now no birthday wishes. Until that moment, we had been best friends. I started fighting back tears. I was too young for this pain. Ray was busy living nocturnal life, and in one weekend, I had lost everything. "Sounds great," I admitted dryly. "Oh, it was the best. Anyway, want to come over today? We'll share a ride and then play Puzzle Master." At least twice a week, we'd get together after school, Ray's house or mine, and play the various levels and subgames of Puzzle Master, a game designed for smart kids to leverage their wits, sometimes against each other, sometimes cooperatively. It was clearly developed by conniving parents like ours. But we were obsessed and had the game keep long-term track of our winnings. I choked on what would have been an obvious affirmative response. This was the first time I realized nothing would really be the same as a sleeper. There were clients and sleepers. and I was in the latter lot. I don't think I can. I've got some stuff to do after school. The stuff was sleep for him, but I wasn't ready to vocalize the truth. Though Ray had the higher score in the game, he was too flighty to work out human puzzles. I slunk back in my seat, hoping he'd figure out that I needed some time alone. Okay, next time. Yeah, next time. Next time would be an eternity. I closed my eyes as the slightly deflated, but still bubbly, Ray moved to his seat, waiting for another kid, perhaps one with a little more cheer. As bad as it was with Ray, it got worse when our classmates arrived. Most children rode the train to our private K-12 school, sharing the ride with parents on their way downtown. When suburbs pushed further out, the district tried to hang on to the fleeing tax base and built one last outpost as a grand gesture to preserve enrollment. An elaborate bond covered the red sandstone beauty with its ornate clock tower and high ceiling hallways. The school, once known by some fancy name like Washington or Roosevelt, was the district's shining gem, physically and scholastically. But when SleepFree swept our city, most clients and their wealth fled even farther out, leaving only a few stubborn families like my own. Private interests, including Desmond Matson, who's Ray's grandfather, financed the purchase of the school to start the most elite private school in the state and help the district cover their debt. The 7:43 a.m. South commuter just arrived. Kids poured into the room like poison to a fresh well. They wasted no time. A chubby boy with short blonde hair made the first move. He'd been waiting a long time to move out of first place for most ridiculed. He leaned in as if my friend, but shouted the insensitive remark for all to hear. Good morning, John. Or should I say good evening? Probably hard for you to keep track of now. The first batch of children through the door laughed. Thankfully, I had dried my mounting tears prior to their arrival. How I answered would set me up for the rest of my life. I mustered my strength and responded bravely. Hi, Brandon. Good morning to you, too. The onslaught was just getting started. That cursed birthday calendar, meant to be exciting, told them all it was time. Ray wasn't yet 8, but his sleeper was now old enough to work. If the calendar had not been obvious enough, they had heard all the gossip about their wealthy classmates over unguarded family dinners. Few students said anything until I became a certified sleeper, partially because they were too young to be so rude in previous grades, and partially because mocking a future fate is not nearly as fun as the real thing. A girl with 2 perfect black braids made the next attack. Hey, John. We'll miss you in music today. Guessing your art days are over, too. She shook her head in mock sadness, and her braids whipped side to side. That's too bad. The words seemed friendly, but her face and inflection screamed disgust. Why didn't Ray rescue me? Where was our teacher? And where was that next bell? The class bully, a short punk destined to ruin his parents' life, arrived on the 7:49 and went for the kill, trying to grab my arms and push up my sleeves. Show us your arms, sleeper! Come on, let's see them! I fought back, trying to wriggle my arms loose, looking for support from these callous hellions. These were the worst second graders imaginable. They left Ray alone, ignoring his new port. He'd have just one in his arm now, designed to receive my sleep chemical. To these students, that port was a rite of passage, something to praise, not the 2-port marks of shame. How's your head? Asked the bully's sidekick, pretending to be concerned. A lanky, awkward kid, he latched on and stoked the flames of whoever seemed to be in charge. Look, everyone! I can see new bumps forming on John. Most of the class, which consisted of client children or future clients, then gathered around to point at my fictitious bumps. The cruelty only worsened that day and every day thereafter. Few days passed without something like, Sleeper, I spoke to Ray's dad. Says I can borrow you next weekend. Or, Hey, Sleeper, I'm so tired from our class party last night. Why don't you go plug in and give us a boost? I would learn enough of history, thanks to my father, to know that this was nothing like real slavery. But it was a new dark America, one I thought equality had erased, and it hurt so bad. It didn't matter that I was the descendant of the first sleeper. It didn't matter that my parents were obscenely rich, wealthier than everyone at the school, except for Ray's. And it certainly didn't matter that yesterday I was just an ordinary kid invited to classmate parties, and friends to many of these puerile pricks. In fact, these matters only deepened the divide and poured malice on the wound. I did my best to stay silent and unseen the rest of the day, even avoiding Ray at lunch. But when the sleeper bell chimed, releasing me 2 hours early, it was clear my days as a normal student were done. The rest of class would go on to electives, and I'd start my job. When finally home, I unloaded on my mother. With my father at work, she was safe to give me proper consolation. Exuding tenderness, she held me tight as we sat on the edge of her bed. "John, don't let these children hurt you. They're only jealous of you." Desperate for some comfort, I bought this classic parental lie for gloomy children. "You're going to be just fine. In fact, you'll be better than fine. I'm going to let you in on my little secret for happiness." She then introduced me to Peter Pan, her solution for sadness. Pulling out a tattered copy from her nightstand, as if she knew it was needed that day, she explained, "There is a world apart from this misery, a world where childhood is eternal, a world where you sleep for you alone. This is Neverland. Neverland is so named because when there, you will never grow old, you will never be ridiculed, and you will never sleep for Ray again, ever. When life gives you lemons, go to Neverland." She handed me the prized possession and wrapped my fingers around it with great care. I couldn't imagine how a book could swallow the pain I felt, but I was intrigued. "Will you read it for me for a while?" "Sure, dear." In the years to come, she would assuage heartache, misery, and self-pity with her so-called Peter Panacea. I learned about pirates and pixie dust. I dreamed of a world with neither cruel classmates nor teachers. I thought of defeating Captain Hook, the symbolic monster of my childhood. And though difficult, I even pictured Ray, my former friend among the Lost Boys on our great adventures, fully reconciled to me outside of sleep. I could forget all reality in Neverland, or at least enough to get through another sleep and another day of torment at school. Neverland buoyed me through those tragic initiatory sleep years, when I still remembered pre-sleep life and expected my old life to return. Imagination and naivete fortified me against the most spiteful peer assaults. When I finally realized I would be sleeping for Ray until we were old, Neverland was no longer enough. The epiphany, though somewhat slow, was like awakening to the knowledge and finality of death. Neverland's peace forevermore eluded me, its embrace always 2 stars to the right, and I with no fairy dust. Like the lost boy who forgot the way, Neverland could never be found again. I am a third-generation sleeper. To the few journals still tracking the long-term effects of sleep transfer, I am the third-generation sleeper. I was born for greatness and shackles. Blood circulates out of my sleep extrusion, a permanent port in my left arm. A portable machine in my bedroom siphons and cleans the blood to extract and store the necessary sleep chemical for Ray, my client. The filtered blood then re-enters the stream through a secondary port in my right arm designed to complete the circuit. The hardware is elegant. I have repeated this daily ritual for 25 years. I spend 7 hours each day sleeping for Ray Huxley Matson. I have blessed him with unnatural nocturnal life in childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. My father and grandfather share the same burden. We sleep and live for the Matson clan, and have since the beginning. Ray's grandfather invented SleepFree. Ray will inherit this treasure. My grandfather was the test subject, the Matson's first sleeper. I have inherited his punishment, but I will not endure his fate. I finish Ray's 7-hour rest unrested. It is not mine. The butler or I deliver the recorded brain pattern and extracted sleep chemical before deterioration. Yet I must still rest for myself. I have only enough time to eat, work, sleep, and sleep again. It is easy money for those adults whose only job is to sleep. But for a kid, the extra sleep steals your entire childhood, erasing those precious few hours of life after school and before night sleep. It certainly stole mine. I am John, son of John, grandson of John. I share my family name and my family curse. Ironic that I should bear the ancestral name, God is gracious. My grandfather recycled the name out of vanity, but my father named me as a form of prayer. My name a manifestation of his desperate attempt to beg for God's forgiveness and mercy, begging him to break the system they launched. I do not share my father's faith. I do not foresee grace saving my family, our company, or the sleeping world. His oft-repeated poetic prayer echoes in my mind, but my actions, not his words, will bring redemption for my family and sleepers everywhere. John, my son, never forget that God is gracious. Never forget that grace comes to those who hope. Never forget that hope transcends your dreams. And John, never forget that dreams are only a waking moment from truth.